Thank you for joining this episode of our webinar series on best practices in eDiscovery. Today's session is focused on the challenging task of finding holes in productions. With the data sphere forecasted to top 175 zettabytes by 2025 and an exponential increase in data sources, ensuring that you're receiving complete productions from opposing counsel is increasingly difficult. In today's session, we'll equip you with some strategies and tactics that you can implement this week to help measure the integrity of the productions you're receiving from opposing parties. My name is Jeff Fugit. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Lexby, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. We've got a lot of information to cover, so we're going to jump right in. Our webinars take place monthly and cover a variety of relevant eDiscovery and digital forensic topics, trends, best practices, and strategies. We've got limited seating, so be sure to register early for the sessions that are of interest to you. If you have technical issues or questions, please email us at webinars@lexby.com and we'll address those right away. Our webinars are available online at lexby.com for viewing via streaming video or downloadable as a PDF presentation or MP3 podcast. You'll find this webinar and a complete listing of other webinars at lexby.com. To be notified of future live and on-demand events, please email us at webinars@lexby.com or follow us on LinkedIn. So a little bit about us. We're based in Austin, Texas, and we've served almost 8,700 legal professionals with our cloud-based eDiscovery platform. We've been doing this for more than 16 years. We have the industry's most affordable and full-featured DIY cloud-based eDiscovery platform. We have the industry's fastest eDiscovery processing and document review platform. We deliver the industry's fastest return on investment per study that was done by G2, and that's largely because of our great affordability, industry-leading pricing. We are also rated as the eDiscovery company that's the easiest to do business with. We have a full forensic lab staffed with Cellebrite certified forensic investigators who perform full and targeted forensic collections. We also have a team of experienced eDiscovery specialists and expert consultants who are all ACED certified. If you'd like a demonstration of our platform, simply email us at sales@lexby.com and we can get that scheduled for you. Joining us today is Karsten Weber. Karsten is the co-founder and CTO of Lexby. In addition to being the architect of the Lexby eDiscovery platform, he is an experienced eDiscovery consultant and expert. He has an MBA from the University of Texas and an MS in engineering from the Danish Technical University. Before I turn it over to Karsten, I'm going to ask for your participation in some polling questions to help set the stage for his presentation. And our first polling question is, what percentage of your cases would you consider document intensive? And while you're answering that, I'll thank you for participating in our polling questions today. All right, there's a couple more answers coming in. Okay, I'll go ahead and close that poll. And our second polling question, what percentage of your cases involve rolling productions from the opposing counsel? And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Karsten Weber. Karsten?
Hello and welcome to Lexby's webinar on finding holes in productions. This webinar is really interesting in that we're trying to find or prove something is missing. We're trying to find something that's not there. And in order to do that, we'll first go through the agenda here. There's a couple of motivations for why this is important. Then we'll spend some time on various areas of examination. What are the building blocks that we can use? And then we'll go into examples of actual applying those building blocks to prove or find holes in productions. Often we hear the following type of complaints about productions. Important sources were missed or hidden, that calling and responsive searches were not done right, so they're missing clearly responsive documents, and documents that appears only after deposition. Those are missing. We can also hear about the data dump where they simply produce so many documents that it's making it difficult to find the important ones, making it take longer and increase the cost. And then using insane estimates of cost that will mean that you can say, I don't even want to do this production. It's simply too costly. It's not proportional. It will cost more than the evidence that it's likely to find. These are all from Craig Ball's excellent blog. In addition, I think these two sentences kind of sums it up. One is, litigants have been ignoring the eDiscovery obligations for so long, they just think of it as an entitlement, like I can get away with ignoring it. But then at the same time, opponents and courts are starting to scrutinize the productions a lot more. They're getting more sophisticated, and they're much more sympathetic to any kind of holes that might be discovered. When you receive a production, you can raise doubt about the quality. It's easier than ever. Judges, as I just said, are more receptive to that. You will possibly end up with time and money spent on defending the production rather than actually preparing for that position. And if there's any kind of problem that is revealed, that can seriously jeopardize your credibility with the court and the judge. And in extreme examples, you will see possible sanctions. So what are some of the causes for exclusion of material that is not necessarily intentional? The first one is failure to identify and collect from all data repositories. That one sounds really simple, but can get quite complex if you have a litigation and say you have 20 people involved as custodians, and you need to go out and collect data from each of them. It might in the past have been enough to go to their computer and collect that. And nowadays, you need to collect it from not only the desktop, but also from mobile devices, phones. You need to collect it from any kind of Google Chats, Skype, Facebook, you name it. And so you have multiple sources from each custodian. And what you really need is, this is just critical. You start out with this, you do some kind of data mapping where you have each of the device for each of the custodians, and that way later you can check off that you've done that right. Failure to institute a litigation hold, that could be an example where you go to collect it, but all the data has been are now gone because they've rolled off backup tapes and stuff. They only retain it for a certain period of time. So you want to make sure you get the litigation hold in place so you don't lose the data that way. All the sources from a custodian's possession, we talked about that. Poor processing or OCR. So that really goes into, OCR is the optical character recognition. If you have paper coming in and they're scanned and they're low quality, when you go to make a production, you can search for keywords and they may very well be in there, but because of the poor quality of the OCR, it has just mangled that word into something that even with a fuzzy search that is somewhat forgiving, it still misses it. And it could therefore miss the entire document. Poor processing could just be turning documents into placeholders or other ways of making the document in such a way that it can't be picked up by a search, which sort of leads into the next item, the poor keyword searches or TAR. That could be an issue of negotiating the right keywords. That has to be made very explicit. Otherwise, if you're just relying on the other side to pick their own keywords, you could be missing huge amounts of data. One case I was involved in, for example, had to do with call centers and how you go from the staff taking the calls and the level 1 support, and then they escalate it to the managers and level 2 support. And the whole litigation was about the technology that allowed you to keep recording as that phone call was being handed off to the manager. And that was known as follow the call. So if you did a keyword search and follow the call, you would think that you're pulling up the documents that are relevant in this case, but it turned out that the other side did not use the term follow the call. They used instead cradle to grave. And so you would never pick that up unless you knew the vernacular of that particular company. And then even a couple of months later, turned out that there was a third term, which was womb to tomb. That was exactly for the same, and now suddenly more documents were turned up. So keyword searches can be quite tricky because they don't always use the same terms. TAR, the technology assisted review, also known as predictive coding or PC, is another example where there are a lot of different dimensions, and it's really important to understand those and find out exactly how does that work, so that, for example, if you have documents that are really different classes, you want to make sure that those classes are all represented in your base set, because most of these algorithms operate on an assumption of a normally distributed set. Another way of saying that is you want to make sure that if you have 10 custodians, all 10 custodians are represented in your base set, because they may have very different styles of communicating. Failing to maintain document date since it's last modified during collections. We'll get into that in more detail in a minute. Okay, so what are some of the areas of examination? First one, the simplest one, is looking for base gaps. So, as you know, every production, base stamped, each page has its own unique number, and every now and then, especially when you have rolling productions, there will be gaps in that production. The next one is gaps in time periods, and as well as missing data for specific custodians, missing data sources, file types, metadata. This is all an intro to the slides that we're going to show next that go into more details on these productions that do not include ESI that was received through third parties. So there might be some cases where you actually already have some of the documents, and now that when they're produced, you can check whether there are any holes. And then missing hits for keywords that are expected in the case. So let's look at each of these. First one, base gaps. This is your first line of defense. You want to go in and make sure, especially in the rolling productions, that there aren't any gaps in what you received. That can either be done automatically by your tool, or you can do that by having a list, keep your own record. The example here shows one where all of the ranges are continuous as expected, except for that between the first and second, there are about, looks like, close to 2,000 pages missing. So if you have an average of 10 pages per document, I mean, that could be 200 documents that are not there. And that's a problem. This is like a first order. You really should go down to a second order, because just because the production comes in and says, I'm going from 64,352 to 66,007, and you look at the first and last page and they match, that does not mean that everything was done correctly, that all of the pages are represented. So the best thing to do is to load it into a review tool. That review tool will then give you the number of pages, and then you verify that against the number of pages that's shown here. So very simple, just subtract the two numbers, add one, and then it should add or match the number of pages in that production. If not, you know, there's a problem. Okay, so what can we do beyond the basics? So how can we prove that something is missing? The best way is to look at the metadata from the production. And what is metadata? Metadata is often described as data about data. One way to think of it is if you have an email, the email body is the content you're sending. That's your quote-unquote data. And then any kind of metadata would be additional information such as the sender, the receiver, the subject, the date it was sent, the date it was received. You can even jump down at a lower level, and you can open up the email, and you can get to the header of that one, and you will see which servers was it sent through. There's a lot of low level that you wouldn't see in the normal user interface. That's all metadata. If you take a document type like a Word document, it will store metadata inside the document. So it will have not just the text that you've typed out in there, but it will also store the author name. It will store the date it was sent. It will store even the name of the printer that was used the last time you printed it. It might have tracked changes, at which point inside that file has all of the revision history. There can be quite a lot of metadata in this file beyond just what you see if you were to hit print it out. And it's that metadata that we need to extract and get in order to prove if there's a hole in the production. So here is a little table of some of the main fields we want to look at. So some fields will not prove if there's a hole in a production. So like the document title will probably not prove anything. That could be whatever. But certainly date sent, date received, date time for emails, the same as who it's from and to, so we can get into the persons involved. The same for the doc source, the file path, and the custodian. Date last modified, file extension and type. Those are the fields, and then we're going to look a little bit more about how these fields are used. I just gave the example of the Word document with all the metadata. It's interesting if you open up, if you have a program like Notepad and use that and save it, or the Mac equivalent of a Notepad. If you go in there and you type in, a 7-letter word and save it, that file will be 7 bytes long. It just has no metadata inside it. It is just whatever you typed. It's very different from Office documents and email. It only contains that. There's no revision history. It doesn't say who last printed it, where they printed it to. There's nothing. But then at the same time, Windows itself will keep track of when was this file created and when was it last modified. So say you create a file in 2015 and you modify it in 2016, and it's one of those, it could be a Word document, it could be a simple notepad, but let's say it's just a notepad. Then even though there's no information inside the file, Windows will keep track of those two dates, and you get properties on the file, and it will show it was created in 2015, it was modified in 2016. Interestingly enough, if you copy that file to another hard drive or to another destination and not move it, but copy it, so you create a second copy, that second copy will now say created date time will be right now. So it'll be the current year. And interestingly enough, last modified date remains the same. So you can now have a file that is created many years after it was last modified, which makes no sense. But that's just how the OS keeps track of that change. So whenever you are looking at these loose files, that last modified date often has more integrity than the date created, unless you use a forensic collection to get the files out. Okay, so let's look at these fields in more detail. How do you get these fields into your review tool? Typically, when you receive a production, it will come with the image files, it'll come with the text files, it might have the native files in the various folders, and then you will have load files in one folder, and one of those load files will most likely be a DAT file, DAT. And DAT is just short for data file. And it's the most common format for exchanging productions. And let's look a little bit on this one so we can see how it gets into the system, and that way we can understand how to use it to find holes in production once it's in there. So here's an example with a volume 001.dat. So open in Notepad, and And that very first line will have the headers followed by one row of data per document. And below it is LexBiz equivalent load file, which is done in Excel. And you can actually see, if you're looking closely here, you can see the row is exactly the same. It says Enron 0001 to Enron 0002. That means, because the range goes from 1 to 2, that is a 2-page document. You can see that here. And then it's of type email, and there will be the date, and there will be the time. And it's the exact same information that's found in Excel. It's just a little easier to read. You can look at these control characters that you're seeing up in the DAT file, and there are 2 types. One of them you can think of as a quote, and the other one you can think of as a comma. So if you substituted out all of those, you would already be a lot easier to read for a human. Computer doesn't care, but for a human, it would be a lot easier to read, and you would have what's known as a comma-separated values file, or a CSV file. If you just substituted out these odd look in the paragraph and the other character for a comma and a quote. It's also interesting to note that if you ever had a document title or something that contained one of these characters, you would most likely break most of the review systems that are out there, because they'll get very confused on that being in the title. So once it's loaded up into the system, you will see it appear as a fielded data. And this is the same document, and here it is, and it's now fielded. And just as you would expect, you can read the actual text from the email, but because it's fielded in the database, that allows you to now apply filters. You can search and say, only show this date range, only show this type, only show this extension, only show this custodian. It allows you to do a lot of information, which leads me to just a critical point that if you are receiving a production and that production is not native, it's not the actual original documents, but instead it's an imaged production where everything has been converted to TIFF, which is the most common format. If you don't get a DAT file, or if you look at the DAT file and you haven't specified exactly which fields you want in that DAT file, the other side, the opposing side, might give you a DAT file, but it just has the Enron 0001 title and nothing else. If you do that, this is what the system's going to look like. It can't just magically extract that information from the images. So all of the metadata has been lost, and it would severely impact the ability to review the production, and it will make it practically impossible to find any holes. So it's really important, particularly for image productions, to get not just the DAT file, but to negotiate all the fields that needs to go in the DAT file. And you can Google what are some of the fields and what should you ask for in production, and there'll be plenty of websites that helps with that. If you get the original ones and you don't get the information from the DAT file, it is still possible with a system such as LexBiz or others to extract that metadata from the files. I mean, that is how they're generally extracted when you create a production. So that would be an example that if you have the native files, it is possible for the system to go in and extract all that metadata, and you can still have fielded data, and you can still sort by it and filter by it, even if the DAT file was missing it. But by far the best practice is to always make sure you get it in the DAT file. Okay, so now that we've laid the foundation, we got the metadata, it's in the system, it's ready to go, then now at the push of a button, you can start to generate all kinds of reports. And here's one example where we're looking at data over time, and we are seeing it in tabular form here and in graph over on the right. And we're looking at just the count, and just looking at the count and nothing else. And you look at the relevant period for this case. This looks very odd, if not suspicious, that there's a lot of documents. This is the document count. So we got tens of thousands of documents, and then suddenly in 2002 it just falls off, and there's barely any. That is so extreme in this case that you clearly go back and say it looks like there's data missing. What if you had an example where it wasn't as extreme, but it dropped off only 10%? In this slide, it depends on how many custodians. If you had 10 custodians and there was a 10% drop in volume, there could be normal fluctuation, or it could be that that single custodian just dropped out. So it's not enough to look at it, and as we did in the previous graph, if the previous graph shows a problem, boom, we're done, it shows a problem. If it doesn't, we're not done. We need to take the next step, get more detailed, and start looking at it by custodian. And you are doing a similar graph where you're just going one person at a time and then seeing if you have a significant drop of those. Once you start looking at the individual custodians, it's very important to do the mapping of these, because you will see that in email, for example, when you're sending an email to somebody, then the name that it's using depends on how your address book is set up. So it may be Bob, it may be John Smith, it might have Johnny, it might have lots of different ones, even for the same email address. You will also have similar differences between whether it's their laptop or if it's their Google Chat or any of the other devices. So you're collecting data from a lot of different sources, and you want to be able to map them in, so when you're getting the count, you're really getting the count for the same person. It will just make it so much easier to look at things later. And that custodian mapping can be tedious, but it's well worth to do that very methodically and just get that done right. Once you've done that, you can do a graph like this one where in that second table, you can see the number of documents per custodian. And so we've got, close to 10,000 for Rick. We've got well over 10,000 for Sally and Kenneth. But then for Jeff and Albert, they're significantly lower. And let's say that Albert Myers was a key person, key custodian in this case. That'd be very strange if he then ended up with only 10% of what some of the other ones collected. There's something that's highly suspicious, or there's something that's most likely wrong, and that would be enough to go back to the court and say it looks like there's documents missing. And this is even if all the Bates ranges and all of that are okay. You can't tell until you get into the metadata and look at it that way. Another option is to look at the file types, and here you would expect emails versus PDFs versus Excel files or Word documents. You would expect some kind of proportionality. I mean, it can't be that you have 2,000 emails and you have 20 docs. That just doesn't fly. So you got to look at them. You're looking at the same body of data, but you're looking at it from very different angles. And this particular graph here could be done either by doc count, like we did it here, or it could be by a gigabyte. So further analysis could be done, for example, by combining the two we just did. That could be done, one person at a time or one file type at a time, but that could get pretty tedious. A very powerful way to do it is to be able to export the data into Excel. Once it's in Excel, you can start to do pivot graphs of this, and you can look at all kinds of counts. So for example, here we have a table that shows by year, it has the custodian and it's got the count. And you can see in the aggregate on the total, it's fairly stable. It seems to go between 25,000 and up to close to 29. So that's fairly stable. But then when you go in and you look at it on a per person and a per year, I mean, there's one number that stands out, and that is from Philip in 2004. It's 899 documents, which is well below what was collected from many of the other ones. So that stands out. That would constitute a hole in the production. The next table shows, instead of showing it by user, it's showing it by type. And so we have Word documents, we got emails, which is emails, and MSGs, which is emails as well. And even though the emails count is much less than the MSGs, that in itself does not raise a question. I mean, that MSGs are just more, it's Outlook, it's more prevalent in the marketplace. So yeah, we expect to see more of those. What we don't expect to see is that sudden drop in 2004 of emails. And so that looks like not the whole range was collected, or some custodians got dropped out, or something happened, or it could be as bad as those documents were deleted on purpose. But it is very, very, very difficult to delete documents on purpose prior to production and not have the other side be able to pick that up, as we do here when we start looking at these types of analysis. Some of the more advanced analysis you could do is also, we can look at email threading. Email threading is another type of internal metadata that says, I'm part of this chain of emails. And you could actually go in and you could find, this is a chain with 10 emails. And some of them may not be on that machine, on the custodian's machine, because they got sent somewhere else and forwarded and eventually came back. But there are others that absolutely should be on the defendant and the custodian's hard drive. And so you can use email families in order to say that there is something missing here. And that's very concrete. I mean, where's this document? That should have been marked responsive. It's pretty black and white. And finally, I want to mention a diagram where you're looking at people emailing each other. So if you have collected two custodians and they email each other a lot, you can look at a table or a diagram that shows how much are they emailing each other, and you can see that where is this thing got sent from custodian A to custodian B. We've collected both of them. Document A was responsive. Where is the corresponding one for custodian B? So you can show that collection methods weren't consistent, or something was deleted, or I mean, that's a problem. So that's also very powerful. So in summary, ESI data just continues to increase in size. In the old days, you might have been able to do a lot of this by hand, and nowadays it's practically impossible. You have to employ eDiscovery as a tool. You have to be able to put it in there. You have to be able to retain the metadata. And once you have it in the system with the metadata, you can run all these types of analysis to find potential holes in the production. Also, judges are becoming more and more educated in eDiscovery, and they will absolutely be sympathetic to any kind of issue brought up on holes in production. So this is an area that is just very important and is going to continue to grow in importance. And I appreciate your time listening to the LexB webinar on finding holes in productions.
Thanks, Karsten. Those are some great approaches to finding holes in productions. Now I'm going to briefly walk you through how LexB helps law firms and enterprises address the challenges of document-intensive matters. At LexB, we provide comprehensive remote and on-site forensic collections that are fully defensible. We utilize industry-leading tools like Celebrite and Magnet, and we handle a wide range of device and account types, as you can see on this partial list. And now I'd like to ask our next polling question. Do you have a forensic collection project, and would you like a complimentary consult? All right, I'll go ahead and close that poll. With Lexi's eDiscovery platform hosted at Amazon Web Services, you get on-demand capabilities that scale to address the needs of your case. With Lexi's cloud infrastructure, you can get from document ingestion to review faster and get your productions out the door faster. All of your remote or mobile connected employees can access the Lexi eDiscovery platform via web browser. It works great on Macs, PCs, iPhones, and Android devices. And I also wanted to point out that Lexi is a single end-to-end eDiscovery platform. Unlike many eDiscovery providers, you don't have to move your data from one solution to another. Lexi has fully integrated processing, review, analytics, case timelining, artificial intelligence algorithms, and production capabilities. Keeping your data in an end-to-end eDiscovery platform like Lexi helps eliminate the risks of errors from moving data between solutions, as well as eliminates the cost of what a lot of people in the industry call promoting data from one platform to the next. And you can do it yourself, and you don't have to use expensive eDiscovery project managers. Lexi utilizes artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms for several use cases. This includes transcription, that's great for all of those web conferences that happened during the pandemic, language detection and translation, sentiment analysis, cognitive image recognition, which automatically codes out photographs based upon the content of those photographs so you can quickly search them and group them together and categorize them. We have entity identification and more. These algorithms are tuned to perform these tasks and help firms to handle document-intensive matters with limited staff. The Lexi eDiscovery platform also has features like advanced email threading and auto-redaction to help streamline the review process. Auto-redaction also helps ensure that you're protecting your client's privacy. Now I'm going to talk to you briefly about eDiscovery pricing. Now, the purpose of eDiscovery technology should be to improve your document review capabilities, driving efficiencies in both time and cost so that you can build your best case. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of eDiscovery providers that don't pass on the cost savings that technology delivers. We host the Lexi eDiscovery platform in the Amazon Web Services cloud, as I mentioned. Our processing, storage, and network capabilities are not only highly advanced, but they're also incredibly cost-effective, and we pass those savings on to customers. Here's an example of how we compare to a relativity reseller. In this comparison, you'll see the relativity reseller charges $30 per gig for data ingestion. Our highly efficient processing servers and serverless architecture enables us to offer this for free. While the concept of promotion might sound good, this is usually a cost associated with moving data from one platform to another. As I mentioned, Lexi has an end-to-end platform and doesn't require that you move your data. Not only does this save you $125 per gig in this case, but it also helps you eliminate data handling errors. We also don't charge user fees, so you can have as many users as you need at no additional cost. Relativity recently announced that they're eliminating user fees. We'll see how that impacts their resellers. We also have 7 different user permission levels to help keep your data secure. We don't nickel and dime you either with OCR or electronic endorsement fees per page. We also have highly advanced analytics integrated into the platform at no additional cost. And we're able to deliver cost savings on the hosting as well. Regardless of if your case is small or document intensive, I'm confident you'll find that Lexi delivers the industry's lowest price, best value, and best performance. And here, I think we're going to show you a couple of examples of some of that value that we deliver. Paige Tackett at Thompson Co. needed Lexi speed to get some productions out the door to meet deadlines. Lexi is lightning fast and gets you from document ingestion to productions in record time. David Jones was concerned he would be outgunned by his AmLaw opposition. He quickly realized that Lexi was a great equalizer and helped him build his best case that delivered a winning verdict. And with that, I'll ask our last polling question. Would you like a demo of the Lexi eDiscovery platform? While you're answering that, a thank you for attending today's session. We'll be making the following available to webinar attendees: a recorded streaming version, an MP3 podcast, as well as a PDF. Let us know if you have any questions or comments about this webinar or suggestions for future topics. This webinar is part of the Lexby eDiscovery webinar series, and for notices of future live and on-demand webinars as part of this series, please email us at webinars@lexby.com or follow us on LinkedIn. Also, we'd like to ask your advice regarding our webinar series. Please complete the survey at the end of today's session. It helps us continuously improve this program and cover the eDiscovery and digital forensic topics that are most relevant to you. And with that, I'd like to thank Carson for presenting today, and thank you for attending. Watch your inbox for an invite to our next webinar on best practices in eDiscovery. Take care.